Yep, keeping everyone safe. I need my committee members to keep our quorum, so.
All right.
Would you all adjust your mics, please?
Yeah, good call.
How's that?
All right.
Good? All right. We're doing the virtual.
Yeah, we're gonna
We're up.
start streaming. We're live now.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Goldstein, and I'd like to welcome you to the September 21st Design Review Committee meeting. This is a 9-person committee whose primary function is to perform design review for projects located in one of the city's 3 designated design review areas: downtown, the riverfront, and the new hotel overlay zoning districts. This is a mandatory review voluntary compliance process, with the exception for hotels seeking to skip council review. Hotels taking advantage of this incentive must receive a positive recommendation from the committee. All committee members and staff are participating in person. We are live streaming on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website, and also linked on the committee page. You can also watch the meeting on the city's YouTube channel, either live or recorded. I will now take roll call. Michael McDonough?
Here.
Brian Moffitt?
Here.
Stephen Lee Johnson?
Here.
Thomas McLaughlin? And I am here. That gives us 5, so we have a quorum.
Yes, sir.
Everyone else is absent.
That's
Right?
correct.
I don't need to say their names because they're not here, right?
No, that's okay, yeah.
Unless
So,
we want to shame them.
we do, yes, we could shame them, but we're not. All right. Great, we have a quorum. First item on the agenda, or next item on the agenda, would be approval of the minutes from the July 2023 and August 17th meetings. Do we have any?
I'd like to move that we approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Our first item for new business, formal design review. The 22 Carter Street item will be continued to the October 19th, 2023
We need to
meeting.
make a motion.
Yeah, if you could.
Do I have a motion?
I'd like to move that we continue that meeting to the October
19.
19, 2023 design review meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. That item will be continued. So our only formal design review item today will be for 27 and 22 Church Street, Central United Methodist Church. It's a level 1 project. Formal review of a new park and plaza space at an existing parking lot on 22 Church Street, and modifications to the courtyard in front of the Central United Methodist Church at 27 Church Street.
So before I get started, I'll just say that the applicant is running late. I would otherwise recommend moving things around, but I know Stephen Lee has to leave a little bit early, and I hope we can get through this item while we still have the quorum. So,
There we go.
is that you, Matt? Hey, welcome. So we do have our applicant here, so. Jeremy, you said you have to leave, or sorry, Stephen Lee, you said you have to leave around 1 o'clock or so?
I need, no, like 10 till 1, so I've got
Okay.
like 15 minutes.
So we've got until 44, like 16 minutes before he has to leave, and we have barely have a quorum. I've already called the 27 and 22 Church Street item. So let's cruise through and see if we can get this.
Yep, that's the
Done.
plan. And I'll just say, even if the vote takes place, there can be further discussion, and this is not a mandatory compliance type review, so the comments in the review today is mandatory review, but only voluntary compliance. So basically, this is the Central United Methodist Church property. Show you real quick on Google. It's just south of Patton Avenue. There are 2 sites in question for this proposal. One is the church itself, and I'll start with the site across from the church, which is an existing parking lot in this kind of courtyard setting with this fence around it. And what's being proposed there is to improve that to like a pocket park with a plaza, some seating step down from the front, and a water feature in the center of the site. A new 6-foot tall fence is being proposed on top of a 2-foot high wall along the front. There will be an 8-foot tall gate proposed in the walkway. Across the street at the actual church site, basically a redesigned entryway is planned with a similar designed fence and gates as well. Let's see. There's the project areas. The removal of the sidewalk at the existing church property. You can see the proposed flagstone type material to enter the church, and then mulch plantings to connect the existing sidewalk to this new entryway. You can see the extent of the fence and the proposed gates at a few of those locations. And then this is the pocket park across the street, which has the proposed concrete pavers, planted terraced seating area, this water trough feature, which then ends at a water fountain at the bottom of the site. Let's see. That's kind of the basic overview. The overall project is in alignment with the guidelines, including the use of materials, additional plantings beyond the minimum required, let's see, opportunities for irrigation and drainage, kind of as it pertains to the water fountain, and then a prominent change in materials to highlight the entrance of a building, to draw special attention to a site, such as at the church building. Therefore, staff recommends approval and supports the proposed park and plaza space and courtyard modifications at 22 and 27 Church Street, as it's in alignment with the guidelines. We also have the applicant here to answer any questions you may have, and I'd be glad to as well.
Great, thanks, Will. Any comments or questions for the applicant or just discussion points?
I have a question. I was wondering if there's like a elevation showing the, on the main sanctuary site plan, if there's like an elevation with the building behind it, so we can kind of see the relationship between the two, and as far as like heights of materials or rendering.
Sure, we only have the site plans currently. I can let the applicant try to speak to some of the fence details in the wall. Since there's no occupiable building proposed, elevations weren't required. It's more of a site plan level review. So there really aren't any like renderings of the fence or hardscaping or landscaping against the church building or the existing parking lot as of today. But I'll let the applicant maybe try to breathe some life into that design a little bit for you.
Please come on up and speak into the microphone so those of us who aren't here can hear you. And introduce yourself if you would.
Yes, sir. Hi, my name is Matt Fusco, landscape architect from Asheville. I'm working with the Central United Methodist Church on this project. The purpose of the project on the sanctuary side is to enhance the entrance and also provide some protection along Church Street to allow for some separation when the church is not in use and to be able to lock gates and close gates. The material used for the walls, that we're going to highlight the main sanctuary, and I was going to pull up. And I'm happy to provide a rendering that we've done for the church, and I can send that in a separate email if you would like. Around the entrance, you can see the gray areas on either side of what we would call the Grand Plaza area. They want to be able to hold services out there from time to time. We would have a low wall that's about 18 inches tall, and then we would bring, or 2 feet tall, excuse me, and then we bring it up with a metal decorative fence that's similar to what's out there. There's a prayer garden that's got custom fencing on the south end of the site, and we're going to match that. So it would be in keeping with the existing metal fences that are there, and then just framing the entrance, we would have the seat wall height and the fence mounted to the top of that, so it'd be 6 feet. And then once you clear the wall section, it would then be 8 feet tall to provide some protection from folks that like to spend the night out there and some things that go on Church Street that is not desirable for the church use.
So what is the total height? Because I was getting.
8 feet total.
Okay, that's a little bit taller than most of the other fences, like.
We match the fences that are in the area. The First Presbyterian Church has an 8-foot fence. We permitted that through the city a few years ago.
Just on that one little section though, right beside it where the gate is, it's not as tall, and then around the kid area, it's like maybe 5 feet tall. And then
The
Trinity.
kid area on that side is, I think, a 4.5 foot. They've got the side that's got the fellowship hall at First Presbyterian was an 8-foot tall fence. The concern with the 6-foot tall is that folks can still climb over that easily. And with the 8-foot tall, they feel like that's going to be a more appropriate height to keep folks out when the church is not being occupied.
It just looks like a fortress. Okay.
The design has been based on kind of in keeping with the European style of church sanctuary and garden areas, and we typically have found that 6 to 8 feet is an appropriate height for that.
I agree with 6.
So
And the height of the fence, so you're taking the little brick wall down, the little temporary brick wall they put up.
On the other side of the road
other
at
side of
the- yeah.
road. And what's the total height of that?
That would be 8 feet as well.
That would be 8 feet as well.
Yes,
So you
sir.
have a 2-footish.
Yeah.
The same-
So we
same
basically are going to
language.
match the limestone in the church building structure, and then there's a precast concrete cap that would
You're
go
going
on
to
top
match the
of it.
limestone instead of doing it out of brick on the?
Yes. That brick is, I don't know if you've seen, it's calico and been
Yeah,
painted and.
they reuse some of the brick from the building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're only replacing the brick to make it look like the church?
We're trying to, have a cohesive design element that brings the park on the opposite side of the road into keeping with the look of the church on that side. Now, down on the lower side of the wall, when you're in the area itself, there are existing brick walls, which we would bring down to an 18-inch height, and then we would cap those, and they may end up being treated with a paint versus doing full limestone.
Yeah, but you've got the brick of the existing building next to it with that wonderful ghost image of the old congregational church. You're keeping the brick wall between the new garden and the alley.
Yes, sir.
So why would you just kind of put a little Queen Anne fake front on it of limestone? Why wouldn't you keep that language all brick?
Well, the part that we would be doing the limestone would be the section facing the sidewalk.
Exactly.
So that retains the element of the church itself. And then once you get down into the.
Yeah, but it feels like those kind of McMansion thing where they put the peel and stick on it and then it's vinyl as soon as you.
It's not going to be peel and stick. It would be.
No, I understand that. I said it's like that. It's, all the language there is in brick and it's a different side of the street. But in other words, if you're going to tie it in, why don't you tie it all in?
Well, the brick on the rest of the remaining road there doesn't have that calico look to it. If you look at the face of that wall, it's been painted.
But that brick has been there for hundreds of years.
We can certainly discuss that with the owner and decide
Yeah, I would
whether
just-
that's something that they would like to do. And if it's a cost thing that makes it more attainable to complete the project, I'm sure that they would keep that in mind.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has this problem. I like the keeping the brick language. I'm not saying you have to keep that weird thing. Like, who did that, Peter? Somebody did that where they just like, you reuse some of the old brick from the,
I do think it brings up a good point, but Matt, just a couple of things. Several of us walk by this every single day, especially Brian, who
4
walks
times.
by 4 or 5 times a day. So this is one of those sites that all of us, including you, know it really well. But I just had a couple of comments, and I know y'all are going to comment about scale. But the first thing, I'm really excited that the Methodist Church is hiring a professional to design this, and the only thing I would suggest in tying in with what Brian and Michael have been mentioning is that the height of the fencing and the scale, it does seem out of scale with Trinity Episcopal and Presbyterian Church. And we've been over there and looked at the Trinity's average is about 5 feet height. And it's been really successful in keeping out undesirable visitors during the evening. So that would be my primary suggestion, is just blending it with the scale and height of the other facilities on the street. And the last comment I have is just, and I think you've done this, but just careful attention to that big elm that is,
Yes.
it looks like on the landscape, there's a landscape plan, maybe there's some protective low fencing
We would be
around it.
protecting the fence, protecting both of the elm tree, the two
Mhm.
large elm trees. And then at one point, there was discussion of trying to do that detail with the low wall and the fence all the way along the facade, or,
Yeah.
excuse me, the sidewalk.
Yeah,
But because of those elms, we've gone to the approach of just planting the posts there rather than having to do a full footing. So we're trying to minimize that impact. And the idea with that entrance to the main sanctuary is that there would be an arch gate at the front that would mimic the arch that's over the sanctuary when you're facing the front of the church. And so from a scale standpoint, we'd be stepping down from an almost 25-foot tall arch down to a 12 or so foot arch that would then highlight that entrance. And so that's the purpose of that. Now, I'm happy to have a conversation with the owner about the height. I certainly understand wanting to be in context with that section of Church Street there. And they've got 8-foot height in the back, so that's part of the reason it's driving
What's
it.
the height at the prayer garden, at the lower entrance on the left side of that, beside the two big elms? That one doesn't feel like it's 8.
It's
6-ish.
6-ish, yeah, I would agree. It's probably 6-ish.
Yeah,
I do not have a measurement handy on that.
Okay, that to me feels like that's the current scale of the fencing on there, and I
Sure.
would think you'd want to be in keeping with that, so,
We'll take a look at that and
Thank
certainly
you.
keep it in mind.
thank you. So my two comments would be that the applicant review whether or not they're going to do the applied limestone on the south side of Church Street piece versus keeping the language of the brick that's there now. I'm not saying you have to keep that weird,
Right.
the old cleaner brick.
Yeah.
And then the scale of the fencing. But the landscaping, the plan itself is, I think, is going to be beautiful. I'm looking forward to seeing it happen. It looks kind of fun, as long as you let us still go over there and eat on the steps.
I think that'll still be able to happen.
Well, I have a few comments. Sorry, we kind of jumped on your presentation only because we're limited by time.
Fair enough. I
So
understand
we
completely.
would
No problem.
normally respect your more thorough presentation. What is going to happen between, there's about a 4-foot 8-inch offset shown between the back of the sidewalk and the center line of the fence. What happens in that 4-foot 8-inch zone?
Where we would highlight around the front of the entrance to the church, there may be some segments of grass, but the idea is that we have a landscape that continues through the fence and into the church. The city didn't require us to do building enhancement landscape per the project and the scope, but the intent is to redo the whole landscape in there, take out some of the hardscape elements, and then on that edge between at least the stone wall and the sidewalk, those would be usually, they would be reserved for, say, annuals and seasonal plantings. They do some seasonal stuff around the entrance as you're coming up the stairs to the sanctuary now, and so some of those areas would be highlighted. There's also been some discussion of possibly doing some hanging baskets on the fence. Clearly, we would have to be out of the right-of-way and obstruction of the sidewalk to achieve that, but by having it offset a few feet, that's going to give us a little bit of room to be able to do that.
Oh, I didn't see that. I'll amplify some of the previous comments. I think the fence is too tall.
Okay.
It just feels very intimidating, and it not only provides security, but it screams security.
Sure.
It's clearly telling everyone this fence is here to keep people out.
Right.
Which I think would be better if it was a more subtle message.
Okay.
When you're looking at the plan, if you don't mind scrolling, the courtyard in front of the main entrance to the church, it kind of flares out, and then it hits the fence, and then there's kind of this planting strip. It feels kind of weird that the apron's coming out to meet the sidewalk, then it hits the wall, and then there's a planting strip. You might want to massage that.
Sure.
And that sliding gate, so it would slide south, I guess, on a track?
We would do a double. This might not be the most recent one, because it would show that We would do a sliding gate that would have to split on both sides because it's a pretty sizable opening, so you wouldn't
So
necessarily be able to
12-foot
achieve
gate
it with a-
panels forming a 24-foot wide total opening? And there'd be some sort of arm that those gates
There would be an
go
arm and a
on?
roller. We're working with the fence company right now to finalize and develop that detail further so that we're not using materials that they can't work with.
And I guess the reason I see the tree to the north end is not a good tree. It's kind of stunted, so I can see that coming out. The tree to the south of the new wider apron, there's a decent maple there. Is it only coming out because it's kind of getting in the way?
It's impacted by the change in the materials on the pavement there. It would be underneath the, let's see.
Yeah, it'd be on the south kind of corner of the.
Hey, Michael, can I interrupt for just one second? Can we continue this? But I think he may have a motion because one of us has to leave, but we can continue the comments.
Oh, okay.
Because it's voluntary compliance, unless someone's, but if you have a motion?
Yeah, I can make a motion and then we can continue.
Okay.
Make comments and go from there, if that's okay, so that we can meet our quorum and hit our marks. I would like to move to recommend approval of the park and plaza space and courtyard modifications at 22 and 27 Church Street as presented based on the site plans and materials submitted and discussions heard during this review. Find that the project meets the intent of the downtown design guidelines subject to the following conditions. One, that the applicant review the height of the proposed fence on both the north and south side of Church Street. Two, that the applicant review the materials proposed for the wall facing Church Street on the south side of the project. Three, that the applicant review the detailing of the sliding gates and the flare of the
Paved apron.
paved apron meeting the street. Anything else? As stated.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further
s-
discussion?
So you're basically approving it, saying, hey, look at these things, but you don't have to do anything, right?
Yeah, because it's voluntary compliance.
Okay.
But we are certainly happy to take a look at those items. I think those are valuable comments, and we're happy to take a look at it for sure.
They've generally been a good neighbor.
I think, again, the fencing thing is a big issue, and concern. But Trinity's fence is 5 feet, and what's being proposed is twice that height. So the column of 10 feet, and then the fence of 8, and it's really significant. So I guess we're more concerned about the character of the street too, because it's so special, so.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank y'all.
We got a vote, we got a vote. We got a vote.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Would you like?
We're going to continue discussion. I mean, our choice is to, you could deny and then, but we still want to have all the input considered, so.
Yeah, I just felt like my no vote would send a stronger message. Not only look at it, but actually incorporate it.
We're happy to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And to answer your question about that maple, the oak on the far end is in really bad shape. The maple, we didn't really want to take it, but in order to create symmetry between looking at the entrance and framing the entrance, the width of the apron and being able to have some congregation out on that plaza area is what impacted it. So I don't disagree, and we tried to not do away with that tree, but in terms of back to scale and relationship to the face of the structure, that's what somewhat drove the width.
As far as I can tell, the only specificity you have in your plantings is, it looks like there's 4 new trees proposed in front of the church. And the only indication is it just says large or mature trees or canopy trees or something like that?
The way that the ordinance requires us to implement that is we had to have large canopy trees. We had hoped to flank the gates with flowering trees on either side, but for compliance, we weren't able to do that, so we're going to be doing large deciduous. We have not determined the final species, but it will be in keeping with the city's plant list. I don't know if we'll do elms, but we'll do something that's a stately tree that would fit with the setting.
What's the holdup on picking the tree?
The city doesn't require us to do that. We're also going to have a full landscape plan that wasn't required by the city for approval that will be secondarily issued to the grading contract, or the contractors doing the work, and then we would install a full new landscape. We're going to be doing a refresh on the entire thing.
And what's the minimum caliper or height to meet the city regs? So you're basically saying we're gonna meet the regs, which are for the trees?
The trees, depending on the variety of tree and whether it's a canopy or a flowering tree, is going to have a different requirement. I want to say off the top of my head, it's 2 to 2.5 inch caliper for that situation and location, but normally we would spec nothing less than a 2.5.
I'm a little concerned about that, looking at this, at the planning plan, there's gonna be one of those that's gonna be under the canopy of one of the big elms, and trying to put another canopy tree there.
I don't disagree with you at all. The city is kind of bound by their ordinance requirements, and appropriately, we think that having flowering trees there would be better than the street trees, but we would need to go to the Tree Preservation
So you say all
Commission.
4 trees need to be
I think
canopy trees?
They do, based on their
I think that's worth
requirements.
I mean, I think the tree commission.
Yeah, I think that they would.
Or tree commission, excuse me, would support that, so I would really
Yeah.
think about taking something.
And I
because they're very.
don't hesitate to note that, even though it's been approved, if you can.
Well, the minutes are public in here.
No,
so,
I
yeah.
don't disagree with that, and
I-
that's something that we
I
would,
would strongly
consider
recommend
taking a
that
look at.
that the urban forestry take a look at that, because I mean, that's one of our honestly historic specimen trees in the city of Asheville. That's just those 2 elms are
Yeah,
deeply
absolutely.
significant, and I don't want to put anything underneath them that's gonna,
yeah.
1, die itself, and 2, take away from them, so.
Well, I could see, keep going down to your planting plan. I could see the 2 that flank the new apron
Yeah, that's fine,
doing canopy trees there.
that's fine.
And then the 2 out from those, one being under the elm, the other being close to the neighboring building.
That's a
stepping
possibility
down.
too, yeah.
I would
Yeah.
see those stepping down, be some kind of small
Sure.
flowering dogwood, something in that line.
As a clarification, you're recommending that they go to the urban forestry
I'm
commission?
recommending that the urban forestry, so in order to change the type of street tree that the city allows, they would have to go to urban forestry for basically it's not a variance, but you get approval for that change.
Alternative compliance.
But we're not, our motion doesn't change because we don't have a quorum any longer, so, but,
Doesn't change our motion, we're just recommending that USC take a look at that.
And it could be presented in that you're gonna scale up those 2 trees flanking the apron and
Yeah.
getting
I
the
think if
bang
we
for
go to the
buck.
commission and can demonstrate what we've got existing and, you know, what the design intent is, the client wanted to get this into process and get
Sure.
it through the approvals so that we also, you know, we do have some situation here with the fencing and egress and those types of things that
Right.
we knew would be conversations with the city, and we're close to actually getting everything resolved and approved, so we're in good shape. But we wanted to make sure this was in front of the city so that we understood if there's any other challenges that we might be faced with in terms of getting the final approval.
Well, thank you.
Well, we got you. Kind of an interesting outdoor room you're creating on the east side. I was reading it as a gathering space, but it's bisected by a water element. So you're gonna have people, I guess, sitting on tiered terraces, potentially on top of low walls.
Yep.
And then you have this water element that bisects the space. What kind of activities are being planned there?
During day use, it would be a place of contemplation. They may do certain types of gatherings there as far as the church goes. And it kind of is evolving. They may end up doing weddings there at some point. Part of the idea with the water feature is that there's an urn at the upper end, which would be the hexagonal shape there. And then it flows out of that into more of a reflecting pool that descends down to the lower pool at the bottom. And then we're planning on having, it's going to be graded so that if you they have an event where they need to cross the feature, then you'd be able to install metal grates. So it'd be like a trench drain type look or detail. But during day-to-day use, it would operate as just a reflecting pool, recirculating
Have you thought
fountain.
about rotating that 90 degrees so that the reflecting piece is actually underneath the peak of the ghost of the old church? Because where you've got it now is kind of like a view to nowhere. You're looking at the back of Lexington.
That's an interesting comment. We had not looked at it that way. We were more or less looking
I
at
know,
the
I know you're
axis.
looking at like the terrace down and then.
Yeah,
and then
the
going from there, but
situation
like,
of them.
if
But
I'm
that's an
getting-
interesting
If I'm getting my
statement, yeah.
picture made in a wedding, I kind of want it framed up against
Sure.
the ghost of the old
Yeah,
church.
and that was one reason we didn't do tree wells in front of the
Right.
ghost, is to highlight that. But that's a good comment. I'm certainly happy to ask that question.
I'd look at it anyway.
And then we're also going to be installing an ADA accessible ramp that comes down along over those old stairway along that existing wall to get folks down into the site, so it will be compliant.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a great point. Yeah, there's a lot of energy with the terrace looking east into
Yeah, I think it's a
whatever.
consideration, for sure. I think it's something we would happily, I can approach them and discuss it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional
Welcome.
comments?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, sorry I was a
Appreciate
few
it.
minutes late.
All right, next up.
I have a question. Is there an opportunity for public comment on this?
Sure.
I mean, I know the motion's already been made. and
Sure.
Yeah.
But speaking to the height of the fence, you know, I agree that the other ones on that street tend to be about 6 feet in height. But I think about places like Charleston and Florence, Italy, and Paris, where you walk by these cathedrals that have high fences like that, and they give you a sense as a pedestrian of this kind of awesome verticality there behind that fence. So it's interesting to think about. I'm not advocating for the 8-foot fence, but it's interesting to think about those situations like that you encounter around the world, where you have these really old cathedrals that create that sense of space by having that really high fence there. But anyway, that was my only comment.
I think that'd be cool if they were like wrought iron and they were like forged
Like the ones you see in
400
Charleston.
years ago,
Yeah.
but this is going to be an extruded aluminum fence, so.
We are advocating for custom gates, if that helps, but I think Tony makes a good point.
Okay,
Fine.
thank
Is
you.
any other public comment?
Any other public comment? Okay. Next order of business would be an informal review of 215 Haywood Street, Courtyard, Asheville, Level 2, 6-story hotel totaling 80,825 square feet to include 115 hotel guest rooms and structured parking.
Everything up for you guys? Informal ones, we normally don't make a presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony.
Tony Hauser, excuse me, Tony Hauser with WSP.
You're not going to talk
Environmental.
about fences again, are you?
We don't have any fence on this. We have, from a site standpoint, the building meets Haywood Street at grade, and then the topography drops off towards Interstate 240. The front of the building will have the parking deck access on I believe that's the west side. One driveway, 24 feet wide. The streetscape in front of the building is essentially that same consistent fabric that's used throughout downtown. It's a running bond pattern turned laterally. I've walked through town and I've looked at all of the examples that I can think of. I have a presentation that I'll do during the formal review. And it really sets the fabric. That running bond pattern, until Will tells me, or somebody in planning tells me we can no longer use that pattern. As much as I find fault with it from an engineering standpoint, it sets the fabric. And it really speaks to the comment that you made, Michael, Mr. McDonough, last hotel that I was here for, about the space between those two hotels that are divided by Homeward Bound and the small residence there. And you alluded to the opportunity to connect those two developments. and really what connects all of the developments throughout downtown and sets that sort of character of downtown is the consistent use of that paving pattern and those tree grades. And that's essentially what we're doing here. We're doing that standard paving pattern and the tree grades. We're proposing a bicycle rack out in the public right-of-way, but other than that, it's that basic pattern. And at this point, I'll turn it over to my colleague to speak to architecture.
Good afternoon, guys. My name's Chris Sandcooler. I'm an architect with Studio Z Architecture. We're based out of Charlotte. Got 40 or so years of kind of combined experience working on custom and boutique hotels. We've previously worked just over at the Foundry and previously a little bit on the Embassy project. So we've got experience kind of working in the city, and we're excited to work on another project. So I'll go ahead and give you guys a little background on the building, kind of talk about where our inspiration came from for the exterior, and then I'll field any questions you guys have.
And feel free to scroll through so we can see what you're talking about.
Sure, yeah. So I'll start. Just let it load. So we're proposing a 6-story, 7 total with a level of subterranean parking, 6-story, 115-room Courtyard by Marriott. The main floor, the entry floor of the hotel, will have a kind of a public bistro space in the front. These plans have been updated with that space since submission for the informal review. We have a public bistro space in the front to kind of activate the storefront, streetscape. We've got a small public lobby area, and then we've got the reception and a lot of the back of house functions going on. There's a few guest rooms on the ground floor. The majority of the guest rooms are levels 2 through 6. On second floor, pretty simple. We've got a little bit of a public node here with an outdoor terrace overlooking the mountains, a variety of guest rooms, and we're showing, I believe, roughly 25 guest rooms per floor from levels 2 through 5. Moving up to level 6, we're showing a rooftop bar and restaurant element. We do not have any branding or additional information on this space at this time, but I can tell you it'll be a restaurant with an outdoor terrace overlooking the mountains that will be accessible to the public.
Quick question.
Yes.
So you've got 2 restaurants, 115 rooms, and how many parking spaces?
So I can go into parking first. So currently we show 58 spaces on site. We are working with the planning department still on trying to understand what the specific parking requirement that will be held to is. How do you divvy up some of those hotel operations spaces? How is parking taken from that? How are we addressing the guest rooms? And then how are we addressing the restaurants, rooftop, and the ground floor elements? Understanding if that parking is required on site or if the restaurant parking can be taken care of with shared or remote parking. As we get more clarifications on those, we may or may not be making some additional changes to respond to that.
Is there ambiguity in the regulations about, there is?
Well,
Not restaurant part, but spots per room?
It depends on if they use the hotel overlay versus a CZ, right?
That's right.
Well, in the downtown, there's only parking required for hotel and associated uses. So the question is whether things
restaurants.
associated with the hotel that are, and where is that? I think there's some interpretation needed, and we're actively discussing that, and we're getting closer to making a determination, so.
If they had their storefront and they were leasing it out to some retailer, then the retailer, they wouldn't be required to provide parking for that piece. The question is how integral or whatever is the restaurant to the operation of the hotel?
Right. So the rooftop restaurant, which has a separate elevator and is just open to the public, is, I think, very clearly a separate use that would not require parking. The kind of bistro more in the lobby that's connected to the hotel but still open to the public.
So there's an incentive for a hotel developer to sublet a restaurant in order to get around the space?
They don't even have to sublet it.
Or just push it outside of their program? Or push it outside their ownership, I guess?
Push it outside of the uses. It's how integrated it is to use and how, whether it's just for hotel guests or even primarily, I think, I can't remember now. We're trying to figure this out.
Sorry about this.
No problem.
It feels
It's,
like if we're gonna review a hotel every month, we
Primarily,
need to
is
know.
Yeah.
it primarily an integrated, is it primarily for and integrated with the operation of the hotel versus is it, a separate thing that's, completely open always and serves the general
Okay.
public?
So if there was no restaurant, this wouldn't be an issue. There'd be no parking regs.
They'd have to provide parking for the hotel guest rooms and then like office space, kind of the
Okay.
front
Not the
lobby.
rooms.
Yeah.
Okay.
When we talked about this a long time ago, when we were looking at the hotel, the ordinance for the hotel, I do remember that, and I think that's why it has something about the operations. You didn't want to penalize a hotel from doing something like putting in a good restaurant, right? So, and making them park that restaurant in the downtown when we don't make any other restaurants park downtown.
Right.
Is penalizing the hotel guy. So you don't want to do that if we can avoid it, was
Right.
my recollection.
Yeah, so I think we'll have better understanding.
There's
by
a lot of
end
angst downtown
end of the
about
week.
parking, so.
No, I
we
understand.
have to get there.
And hotels.
I understand.
And
This is, I always park in the Rankin Street deck, so I was over in this part of town, and I was like, I have absolutely no idea where to park.
Right behind us.
Yeah, I figured it out after a while. So to answer the general parking question, we will address it as needed as we talk with these guys and get a little more clarification. But we do understand that the general angst in downtown related to the parking, and we want to make sure that we're abiding by that.
And in those 50 spaces, does that include lifts?
Yes, yes. Yeah, we're working on a small site,
Yeah. How many lifts?
somewhere between 15 and 20, depending on how arrangements are made.
What's the weight limit on those things?
Yeah, I'm not going there.
That I don't know.
Hummers.
Okay. No, keep going, I'm sorry.
Sure,
Sorry,
yeah,
that
no-
just
no
stood out
problem.
to me. I just figured.
No, it's a good comment,
Ask the
and
question up front.
parking's been something we've been discussing internally, so I got to see a peek behind the curtain there, so that was helpful. Looking at the building's exterior, obviously, Asheville's a special city, and you guys from the last discussion clearly care a lot about making sure we kind of dot our I's, cross our T's on how the exterior of this building looks. So our first approach was to just kind of generally, we walked around the city a bunch, looked at specifically fenestration, because when you think about the hotel typology, so much of what's happening on the exterior of the building is specifically generated by the guest room stacks and how they're working with the exterior of the building. So we looked specifically at some of these buildings. I highlighted 2 of them up here, but the general idea was to try and emphasize vertical hierarchy, recess the windows as much as we can, and then use coursing, corbelling, et cetera, to try and find some definition around those windows and add a little intrigue to it. In terms of materials, we looked specifically at our future neighbors and neighbors in construction and current neighbors for a general material palette. What we found was a lot of dark brick, some red brick, and then a variety of shades of light gray, white eaves. So that was kind of the general material palette that we started our approach from. The last thing we considered was just generally this is it's a Marriott property, and Marriott does have a say in this, so we wanted to take a look at what their prototype looks like. I think we'd all agree that that's not a building that's meant for downtown Asheville, but there are certain elements that we took from that to try and show that we're trying to maintain and incorporate the Courtyard brand. So looking at the exterior, just kind of, what if I can zoom in? Can I zoom in on this? Nice. So looking at that, like I said, we tried to emphasize some of the verticality using those kind of the brick set out. We tried to recess eaves here where all the window conditions would be to try and create the vertical fin look that the Courtyard Marriott brand does incorporate. Most of the traffic, in our opinion, visually and also vehicular, would be coming kind of from, I guess you could say, this side of the city, the eastern side of the city. So we tried to emphasize that front corner, create an element of interest there, and along the streetscape, kind of recess that back and create that, covered, sheltered presence to allow people to enter that streetscape, bistro element that we're calling it right now. Looking at the streetscape specifically, try and dress it up right
We do
now.
appreciate all the perspectives, by the way.
Oh, yeah, of
Sometimes
course.
we get to this point, and there's one.
Yeah, and we'll try and smooth out. We got some curbs right now that are not cooperating in our modeling program, but there's so much topography that it's been a fun adventure to model all that. But to try and dress up the streetscape, we provided as much glazing as we possibly could at the kind of the public uses. We incorporated on kind of canopy awnings at all those spaces. And tried to create, it's not necessarily a courtyard, but tried to create some sort of little pocket space here to bring the entrance to that bistro space slightly off the public sidewalk there. And I think unless you guys have anything you want me to specifically cover, I'm happy to take questions at this time and receive some initial feedback. Talking to Will earlier, this is our team's first time working under the new hotel ordinance guidelines, so we're happy that the informal meeting's an option so we can get kind of initial feedback and come back to you guys in the future.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sheet A332, it's above your color renderings.
Yes.
It's a section through the building, looking east, I guess. It's showing the drop off, and I'm reading a 6-foot climb from the sidewalk into the kind of motor drop off.
Sure.
Am I reading that right?
So we're working with Tony's team to figure out what the final grades are at that area, and then how we transition from the grade into the building we're designing right now. I don't know if it will be necessarily that tall specifically. A lot of that grading there was due to us trying to create those perspectives and get a model that reflects the terrain, the existing terrain around the building.
Well, this relates to my question. It looks like you're kind of struggling as to where the front door to this hotel is. There's one on the southeast corner, and then there's kind of one in the motor court drop-off, and there's an opening on the street wall, and it looks like you have to walk up a pretty steep ramp. If your main entry, go back, there's a zoom of that, I think, yeah. So my gut would say that from a pedestrian, once you've landed in the hotel, that's the door you're going to use on the southeast corner. But it doesn't seem to be played up much. If you go to the rendering, there's a small canopy over it. It seems like we struggle with this a lot on every hotel review, that obviously people are going to arrive by vehicle and you have to handle that obvious logistic, but the building also wants to relate to the sidewalk and
Sure.
pedestrians, and it seems to me like you're not sure where you want the front door to be. And it's kind of hard to read in that rendering, but there is kind of a bronze metal visor that comes out, but to me, it might want to be lifted up. There's that band, that white kind of precast cornice thing, which it seems like we see that on every hotel now. There's a band that wraps around, and it kind of breaks up what happens below, because you're following the program. So you got one thing happening above it, one thing happening below it.
Sure.
So use that to break it up. It'd be great if we could see something else. I kind of get it on the corner, but continuing across where it bumps out, seems like that might want to read as a 2-story element. I don't know. But anyways, going back to the entrance, it seems like you need to commit and play up that entrance. When you look in the glass there, you are seeing lobby and all that. The other hole, I don't know if you can quickly go to that, but next to where the cars enter, there's a pedestrian hole in the wall there. And one of my least favorite hotels downtown is the Cambria. Are you aware of how you have to enter the lobby on that one?
I'm not. It's just a couple blocks up though, right?
It's across the street from the Grove Arcade.
Yes.
Everything they did, don't do it.
Okay. I'll take a stroll by.
Yeah, and
That's
that's
helpful.
kind of what they did. You kind of have to like figure out where the front door is and kind of walk in next to where the cars are dropping off, and it's super awkward. So I would like to see you play up that corner entrance, because you have that I mean, you allude to the Marriott brand, as every hotel has a corner tower element.
Sure.
And so that's from a distance and saying, hey, we're right here, there's some Marriott. But then when you get there, you're like, where's the front door?
Okay.
Just from a building organization, I was going to ask you to look at that differently, because there's a lot of little parts and pieces to this building, and then they're sort of tied together and they're sort of not. And I either want them to be less tied together or more tied together. In other words, I want this to be like one building, or I don't mind it being different buildings. What I mean, you can stay on that image.
Okay.
The corner, you start to make it something and you poke it up a little bit, but you're using the least interesting materials on the corner. You kind of got, you know, the glass is neat, but then you got gray ephes. And then
Sure.
but somehow I'm supposed to think that's the special piece, but it's not as special as the pieces to the side. So do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I understand.
So that corner piece, to me, if you want it to be special, it should be using some of the special materials.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. I think you can. I don't think I'm. A lot of people are trying to do this horizontal datum, and I know that you know our guidelines say basemental cap. No, it says you like basemental cap.
Sure.
You've got a building organization already in some of the language that you're using and the things that you're doing, and that piece can be itself all the way down. It doesn't have to be tied into the pieces on either side of it in exactly the same way. At least I don't think so. And I do think I think Michael already said that little two-story piece in the front. It's different than the rest of the building, but not very different, and I think it could be more different, and it would be really dynamic. And I think you could do some things where either that defines the main entrance or it's completely broken. Honestly, I think you could do something where it's a really kind of a neat building where you've got the two sides with the little shadow box brick pieces, and then you really do break it with a complete glass tower or a really special tower that breaks that piece. And then you've got a separate kind of thing that's out here in the front. The corner, that corner is more developed. The other corner where that, from that other perspective where you've got the vehicular entrance is not as well developed. That whole portal for the vehicular entrance is just kind of a break in the wall, and it needs to be designed. And then I would say, you know, I like a lot of the things that you're doing with some of the corbellin and the shadow box thing with the brick, but it only occurs in a couple places, and then we get very, very little to nothing kind of on the rear.
Yes.
And I understand that to a point, but I also don't necessarily, and I wonder if there's a way, like when you start and stop, this dumb thing doesn't have to work. When you start and stop the brick, needs to make more sense to me. The little shadow box thing, like on the Road right, Haywood Street side, and then you got the side going towards Monfort. That one just kind of, it's there and then it stops, and there's no good reason. The other one wraps around three sides, and so I see where it stops.
Sure.
In other words, I think they need to be a little more different because the windows are the same, the patterning is the same, but suddenly just the language is just like, well, we ran out of money, so, you know, we're going to do I get it.
Sure.
Make it more formal.
Okay.
Why you're doing the things you're doing.
Plus,
that
you're
makes
gonna,
sense.
you know, 240. This
Man,
is
that's-
a building that you can see all sides, so
Yeah.
it's a
You
can
hard
see all
one to
sides.
try to save, to try to
Yeah.
cut down on the backside because
Honestly,
everyone's going to be driving back and forth to get off, and they're going to see that.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the Indigo, when that one went up, that was about the time they were, remember the big one they were proposing where they eventually put the aloft?
Yes.
Anyway, the Indigo ended up being taller than anything else just because of where it sits on the hill. This is similar. You know, as you're coming into town, you're coming across, especially when we, someday, when I'm 87 and they get the connector finished, you know, and you're coming across, you know, this is going to be one of the first, that elevation right there is going to be what you see as you approach downtown Asheville. So I would spend some time on this piece. I think you started to on that upper piece, like that's starting to look interesting. But this corner, I think it's going to be more visible, honestly, to more people.
From a long-term value proposition, more
Seriously.
time
Yeah.
could be spent on this side. I
Yeah,
think.
our team has discussed taking the brick, what you guys call like the brick shadow box pattern, and I mean the building kind of turns into three masses. It's a
Yep.
wider, it's a rectangle, and it kind of widens again on the back. Take it like almost like an irregular shaped dumbbell, taking the rear part of the dumbbell that faces that and incorporating more of the masonry and reintroducing the shadow box to make it seem a little more
I think
cohesive.
So. I think,
Yeah.
I think, and then like when you stop those pieces, when it's this language versus that language, I think you could do some more work.
Sure.
I'd like to amplify that. Sorry, some of us don't get to talk about architecture.
No, this is great. I don't get to all the time either. I'm just going through pricing on all my other projects, so this is fun.
Yeah, this is like being back in school. So yeah, the corner piece, it kind of rises up a little bit taller, but then that same gray ephes becomes a parapet above the brick on the two sides, and it kind of minimizes the tower that it shows back up again. And it just, I think I could read in the section that the top of the brick almost rises up to become a parapet for the roofing, and that extra ephes is just to make it taller, which we do need to shield your mechanicals. So
Sure.
we do need it. But it seems like maybe you just grow the brick up another 2 feet. But I agree, maybe you put more brick on the corner piece. But the gray kind of lifeless ephes and the black glass, it seems like if that's going to be your flag there, it needs a little bit more pizzazz. And then on the front, you have those little HVAC grills kind of carved in. I would study that some more. And is there any reason why the height of the vehicular access is so tall? There's a rendering showing a car driving in, and I haven't looked at the scale, but if you scale back, I mean, it looks like it's
No, it's
18 feet tall.
it's tall.
Just kept that date on the line across
Speaking
there.
with transparency, I believe it's that tall to hit the street front opacity and openness requirement. We basically put as much glass as we could on the public-facing spaces, and we've got the vehicle drop-off area, which I suppose we could line with some additional storefront glass.
Or just put a metal screen, like, actually maybe make, if you could find a better view, maybe make the opening the brick taller, and then come down with a transom
Sure.
infill panel that kind of matches all the transoms to the right.
Yeah.
Because you kind of step down the brick.
It would also frame that open. I don't like the way we're doing these car openings. They just look like, well, we've got to get a car in there, and they don't
Sure.
look like an entry. And I think they should look like an entry. It should look special.
Does anyone in the city, are there any example projects in the city that you think have done a successful car entry? I ask this because I'm walking to lunch and I'm going to loop around the Cambria on my way.
Not the case.
Well, actually, if you can scroll back, there's a view that gets a better view. I think you'll see what we're saying is, I think it'd be pretty easy to just cut the brick higher up and then add a transom panel. It could be louvers, it could be, actually the other area, doesn't that have some interesting like metal weaved stuff?
The AC? I think it does, yeah.
I think it does.
And one of your inspiration photos has a hotel being proposed, and I recall that one had a lot of proposed metal screen panels.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
did.
I'll clarify
It
real
wasn't really
quickly.
around the vehicular entrance of it itself, but they did have those nice panels.
While we're on the point, I just want to clarify the facade and opacity requirements on the ground floor is measured linearly across that, so it's not really by area like the upper stories. So if you did want to drop some of that height
Okay.
of the opening, it wouldn't impact the opening calculation.
Okay, that makes sense. Yep.
And it probably wouldn't hurt to, like, that hole to the right of the vehicular opening, the people walk in, if you want to encourage people to come in there, then kind of play it up.
Sure.
Like celebrate that that's where people enter, not cars. And man, the 3 holes in the brick at the very top where the kitchen is, I know you don't want windows in there, but you kind of have a nice framework of brick, and you fill it mostly with glass and maybe some step back brick elsewhere. But then on the top there, I think we have some other hotels where it just hurts to look up there and see that panel. It's almost like there was a big lobby plan there, and then somebody changed their mind, and then they just threw in an EFIS panel. So maybe storefront that's shadowed out or something, like make it glass, but you can't see in it. But
Or just stop the shadow box and you do something completely different on the top.
Yeah. I think both are potential solutions. I'd say internally, we also felt similarly that could use a little more dress up there for sure.
it's, I think, like one of the more visible. It's on the top floor, and you've got the restaurant, the balcony to the west, and then 2 big bays that are glass, and then you have 3 dead panels.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
That upper floor looks so exciting, except for right there.
No murals. Architecture.
Yeah, I guess that's another question that we had discussed too. Is that a possible solution, or
No, he doesn't like murals.
Okay.
No, I love murals.
On new buildings.
I love
In place of
murals.
architecture, sorry.
Yes, I don't like murals in place of architecture when we can design something that makes sense there. There are some places where, it's a party wall or something like that.
Sure.
We can't have any windows there. Okay, but even then we can do architecture. But something like that, no, that's just because we got lazy and stopped designing and went, well, we'll just slap some graphics on it.
Sure.
Which, we can do that, but I'd rather do architecture, because why not?
Yeah, understood.
So anyway, have we given you decent feedback? So I mean, I think the massing is okay.
It is what it is.
You
Yeah,
know,
it's a hotel.
you're doing what you're doing, and we're going to work with you to try to help you to sharpen it as much as we can.
No, I agree.
And go from there. So there are many other designers that aren't here today that'll give you their 2 cents when you come back. But
Sure.
hopefully that gives you something to go back
And
with.
again, I don't know what your time frame is, but we've had multiple projects come back for informal review more than once, if you feel
Okay.
like it would be helpful. This could be a good candidate for that, I think,
think so.
especially
It's a
since a
big
lot of us,
project.
a lot of the designers aren't here.
Sure. No, yeah, I agree. I think you guys, internally as an architect, I reflect on my own work, and I think you guys caught a lot of the things that I think needed a little more extra design time. So I think it's good to hear that, and we'll probably honestly see another informal review to track our progress and make sure we're on the right track.
Well, and then this is the kind of informal review that I don't mind seeing more than once, that's actually been designed, versus someone gives us some
Yeah.
blocks of stuff and says, what should we do? That I don't like, but.
No, I don't like that.
Well, I'd spend some more time at the Foundry. That's one of my favorite hotels in
Good.
town. I thought it was really well done. You can't tell the new pieces, but I guess you can kind of tell if you knew, but
It's stitched in well enough that it all looks like one piece, and it's a good piece, so.
and the brick is authentic. I mean, you've got this kind of warehousey pattern of brick. That was legitimately, Foundry warehousey, so it might like sharpen your vision for the language of the brick.
Sure.
Is it just applied as decoration, or are you
Yeah,
trying to make it imply that this was kind of an industrial building and you filled in around it?
well, and I guess it's like the little 2-story piece. It's like I want it to be more like a warehouse and less kind of mid-century mercantile, or go full mid-century mercantile. You know what I mean, with like corbels and
Sure.
punch windows. And, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
It's like that. I think that piece wants to look like West Asheville downtown, or it wants to go, no, man, I'm something different, I'm a little more modern, with big openings and less of the kind of little precast elements, cornices and stuff. I think you can push that one a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that could be a lot of.
We very recently made the change from a one-story little, we'll call it a trapezoid, one-story trapezoid up to the two. And I think it looks flat. So I think it needs more depth, more interest, or just something to be completely different. I agree.
Yeah.
I saw the Thompson Hotel in Denver in your inspiration. It looked really good, so I went to the website. It's a very nice looking hotel, so
Yeah.
I'd say spend some time looking at that.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell if it was an old renovated building or new.
Right? Yeah.
So that's what you
Yeah.
want, is this a new building or a renovated building?
We started design, and one of my coworkers had just come back from Denver. He's like, I walked by a building that when we did a little charrette in the office, like I walked by this building and it had a corner and it had brick in the windows and it was a nice grid. And then we were like, oh wow, it's good inspiration.
All right, well, thank you. Any other comments? Great.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys.
Yep, thanks. Okay.
Can we talk about hotel parking?
Sure.
Is there, I'm just starting maybe a conversation. So we have all these hotels that don't want to spend the money, obviously, for cars. They'd rather spend their mud room for guests. I guess most people or many people are arriving by plane. Is there some sort of like group effort to create some sort of shuttle to like encourage people to leave their car and arrive by plane? And like, it seems like with all these hotels, they could all get together and have a constant loop going to the airport, like every half hour.
Well, you've got Uber and things for people to get from to
Are you
Asheville.
taking an Uber from the airport?
This Asheville, not this one, but
It
every
ain't cheap
other
and it ain't
airport.
easy. Yeah, it's not
Every
like
other
other
airport.
airports.
One of the
I guess my point
requirements.
is, I mean, you're talking about like Chattanooga or something, like a bus that just constantly is moving around the major points of the city where once people get here, they can.
I'm
they
thinking
have a way to
more
get
about,
around. So-
well, yeah, I was
He's
thinking,
thinking the TDA, he's thinking the TDA should be running like constant shuttle or
yeah,
something
like
like that.
Well, that is in pursuit of tourism, I mean.
a holistic approach to like, how do we make it so people can come here and enjoy being here without their car?
Yeah.
Like getting from the airport to the hotel.
That's public infrastructure and density, enough demand for it as well.
Well-
What is in the hotel
Yeah,
overlay, there's
there's-
parking requirements per room, correct?
There are, I was going to say real quick too, there's also requirements that all large hotels provide a shuttle service to guests. So there is a required shuttle service
For large hotels?
for large hotels.
But it
such
doesn't
as-
say frequency or how big.
No,
or-
it's very vague, but perhaps.
So, they could have like a, Honda Fit or something like that.
Every time a
run
guest
out there
flies in,
twice
they
a week.
drive out.
Yeah, but be
Call
careful
it.
about, I don't like getting into the business of, because these businesses are changing all the time, the culture's
Right.
changing, the market's changing, but.
Maybe the hotels partner on the transportation service they contract with, and then it becomes more of like a loop that they run, and then it still meets the requirements, but provides more of a predictable.
Yeah, can they go in together and it counts as a hotel?
I don't
as a
see why
shuttle?
not.
That's my point. It
Yeah.
seems like there's enough hotel developments here and enough rooms that, and it's in everyone's interest for people to leave their cars at home.
Yeah.
So like, how hard is it that we develop a more robust transportation system that's not private automobiles?
It's very, very hard.
That's a city level, I think.
No, it's
commitment.
a TDA level.
Yeah.
It's a hotel developer level. It's like,
Let it
we
make-
all are struggling with the same thing, like,
But we can bring it
band
up.
up.
We can at least bring it up in the downtown commission and talking to council about.
The mayor just
how that
issued an
works.
op-ed about
Because that could also serve
passenger rail
the
service to
population.
Asheville.
Sure, yeah,
I'm saying,
yeah.
if it becomes a city level thing and encourage, like you said, less automobiles. Hey, we as a city provide, again, I think of Chattanooga, I haven't been in years, but they had just a quote unquote free, which we know nothing's free, but when you're there, you don't have to get in your car, you can, it's just running, it's electric, and it's fantastic. And it serves not only guests to the area, but residents.
Might actually work too.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, okay.
Anyway, any future I mean, we can add that as a more of official future
No, that's not a
discussion topic
design,
if
it's
you'd
not
like
a
to.
design issue, it's
Yeah.
more just like this, what's the metaphor? Elephant in the room? It's like
Yeah,
the damn car.
yeah.
Well, I mean, if this turns into a CZ, then everything's on the table. The parking requirements go out the window. They could ask, they could require more, they
Is it
they
a
could.
CC? It's not a CC, they're trying to do it.
This is trying to do the overlay, yeah.
Yeah, this fits the level two.
Yeah. All right, if there's no other discussion, if there's a motion,
I don't know if you
I'd like
can
to
make a
move it.
motion.
what?
I don't know if you can make a motion.
Oh, we
so
can't. All right,
It don't
goodbye.
exist.
I don't move and I don't second, I just leave.
I think it's stay here, yeah, stay here
He needs
until.